There's too much more to talk about. Carol's going to give the background of the Candor Hall, is that what we're going to call it? I mean, it's been a lot of things. And I think just from the responses we've seen online, there's a lot of stuff that happened there that people weren't aware of. There's a lot of building in that building that people weren't aware of. And I'm excited because Carol is going to have an interesting presentation, and then I'm just going to tell a few stories about the 10 years that I worked for John and George. So, Carol.
Thank you. Well, I kind of gave this talk a little bit before, but what we're going to do, we're going to start way back in the 1870s. Can you hear me?
No.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to yell.
Yes.
Is that better?
Yeah, voice not voice.
I'm not mad at anybody. Okay, so it originally was Young's Hall. And partial information, I do want to give credit. The beginning of Don Weber's chronology that he kept when he was historian was priceless. And what I did is I input it into my computer so I could search for different things. And so that's kind of what I've done here. So a lot of it is coming from him. Later on, when we get into the grocery store segments, I do have information from the actual owners. So that information is going to be from them. Okay. So back in 1875, this site was a three-story buildings owned by William and Carolyn Young and was under construction. But a fire broke out and damaged the stage and scenery. Now, it was a theater. Somebody asked me about that, and there are some pictures here of when it was a theater back in the day. And by 1878, after rebuilding the hall, accommodated the International Order of Good Templars, Knights of Honor, the Patrons of Husbandry Grange, the Grand Army of the Republic, GAR, and the Canon Masonic Lodge. By 1879, they had built a hotel connected to the main site. Okay, so this whole site, even though we're going to concentrate on just the town hall, where the grocery stores were, all the 380, 82, and 84 Main Street were kind of a deal. They were all together. So in 1889, just a few years later, the ground floors were occupied by Voorhees Brothers, which were a flour and feed store, and L.A. Hart, who sold farm implements. The rooms on the second floor were used for office space as well as a barber shop. The third floors were meeting halls, as mentioned above, and there was a public hall in the rear of the second floor where most of Candor's cultural events took place. And there were a lot of them within a 50-year period that we're going to talk about first. On March 26, 1889, a fire thought to have been set by arsonists caused considerable damage to both buildings, including 80 Main Street. Now, I read a little bit farther and to find out, you know, what caused the fire. And I read a little segment where they had kerosene was splattered throughout. So that's why they suspected it was an arsonist. But they never got anybody. Okay. So now we come to when it became Candor Hall. November 1889, a group of Candor businessmen organized the Candor Hall Company and purchased Young's Hall, ruins, it was still in ruins at that time, with the stipulation, and this is interesting, that the property would not be used for stores for 50 years.
Oh, boy.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about these 50 years, and then we'll open it up for a little discussion if anybody has anything they want to add before we get into the 1940s. Okay? Okay, so 1890, the first record of using the new Candor Hall for community events was for a Memorial Day event. The Grand Army of the Republic's Drum Corps and Parade marched to the cemetery, then back to Candor Hall for public services. The Methodist Church choir led the singing. In the evening, a war drama was presented by the Sons of Veterans. Now I'm gonna go down through dates of significant things that took place, even though in between there was always something going on. 1896, a huge temperance rally filled Candor Hall to overflowing, and by 1899, big scenic productions were introduced. So there was movies and all kinds of cultural shows being offered. Now, by 1903, the Baptist church was being renovated, so services were held at the Candor Hall. Now, Gary asked me a question about why is it the Candor Hall, Town Hall? And if you, just as an interest, the village did not incorporate until 1900. So there was no village, so it was a town hall. So that just helped with that a little bit. So by 1904, Young's Hall was known as the Candor Opera House. Will Beebe named it that. He was the newspaper editor and man at the time. And as many of Candor's cultural events were held here too. So I've got a few listed events that took place. The African Boys Choir came. Brock's Orchestra from Ithaca played. The Owaga Concert Company. Miss R. May Holmes of Binghamton's piano recital. Vaudeville shows, many picture shows, orchestra performances, and many more forms of entertainment were taking place there on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So a lot of cultural things going on here in Candor. In 1907, a large addition was finished in the enlarged facility with a new stage, with dressing rooms underneath, and increased seating capacity, reopened with local talent presenting the drama Farmer Haskins to benefit the Oneida tribe Order of the Redmonds, which was an organization that was here in Candor. Now, to interject here, in 1907, Johnson Stone Hall, also in competition that same year, A.A. Johnson finished and moved into his magnificent new concrete block store located on the corner of Mill and McCarty Street. Okay, y'all know where that is, which was dubbed Johnson Stone Hall. Here events were held in the large hall upstairs, which began to infringe on Candor Hall's entertainment business. There's a little competition going on here in Candor. Even back then, oh my goodness. Okay, so the other thing that happened in 1909, anybody have an idea of what that might be?
School burned down.
Oh.
Exactly. After fire destroyed the Candor Free Academy in March 1909 and the new high school was being built, Candor Hall was adapted for grades 7 through 12. And then the Behringer House, also on 5 Water Street, housed grades 1 through 6. Okay, so in the meantime, variety shows. After the students left in 1910, the Hall Company lost no time in booking George C. Williams and Associate Players of Ithaca, who presented a comedy drama down at the Capitol. I have no idea what that entailed, but I can only imagine that it was a comedy. In subsequent years, there followed a variety of cultural events. One such was a 2-week medicine show with clean vaudeville and 2 new moving pictures. Movies were in their infancy and technical difficulties were commonplace, I can imagine. So V.G. Merrill's celebrated moving pictures and illustrated songs, which was a refined show for refined people of Candor, played for 2 hours on Thursday evenings. Admission was 10 cents. Oh boy.
Can they hear?
For children, 15 for adults.
Yep, she's doing good.
Actually, Don Weber had made a comment in his notes that it was very expensive at an hour's pay for the labor of the day. So that wasn't really cheap, even though it sounds like it. However, the projector light was poorly condensed and once fixed had to be shielded with a portable screen so it wouldn't blind the audience. Another company used kerosene lights and vowed to switch to electric lights. And I'm sure that happened, but I had no mention of that. So Home Talent Drama is a series of entertainments with musicians, pantomimes, singing orchestra, elocutionists, lecturers, impersonators, and players also took place there. The 4th of July speeches, political rallies, dances, suffrage meetings, farmers' institutes, temperance rallies, and benefits of all kinds were some of the events that took place here, including a dance put on by the Pocahontas and Redmond Society in 1915. After 1910, however, some of the community's cultural events were held in the assembly room of the new high school. So not only were they competing with Stone's Hall, now they're competing with the school.
Oh, boy.
And so by 1925, the Candor Theater Company closed. But they did keep going for a few more years, even though they were officially closed to the public. They still held some events. So a few more things that happened. In 1928, the Candor Student Association rented the hall for basketball. In 1931, Fred Embody's barber shop was located here. 1936, there was a large gymnasium auditorium was added to Candor High School, and the use of Candor Hall for school purposes diminished once again. Okay, so I am now going to open it up if anybody has anything they want to add during that period of time before we get into the grocery stores. Yes?
Question, were there any burlesque shows?
Pardon?
Were there any burlesque shows?
I didn't find that in Don's write-up, so I have no idea. And in the papers, you know, papers that I've gone through, there's no mention of that. Anyway.
Candor was a pure town.
Well, for refined people. These shows were for Candor's refined people. And I do want to note that a lot of people came in by train to these entertainment venues. Okay. Anybody got anything else?
When was the minstrel show that's in that picture?
I'm not sure if there's.
Probably after what you're talking about, based on how much it
It
cost.
says October 6th, but that's all I know.
No, the December, the one to your left.
Oh, this one?
That one.
Oh,
Probably after what you're talking about, because it was 15 cents and 35.
yeah.
Who would be?
They raised the price.
Did they?
That's life.
Some,
That's life.
some darn show, wasn't it? Because I'm looking, I'm like, I don't see any date on there.
Let me
That's
see now, what did I say, what year was it, 10 cents here?
Yeah.
Uh,
1909 or around then?
I don't know.
19, yeah, because after that, the school.
Yeah, it had to be after that, it had to be after that, anyway.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Okay, anything more? I think Candor was a swinging town there for a while.
Yeah.
They had a lot of entertainment.
Yeah.
And people in town also put on productions and like recitals and stuff that took place there. And again, the organizations that met there is just amazing. I'm at one point, I probably will mention that the Masons met there for 60 years. So, and some of the other ones, you know, before they got their own little buildings or places to meet.
Carol, do I remember that there were dances
Oh, yeah.
held? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's all kinds of entertainment and dances and stuff. Matter of fact, I'll mention one particular one here shortly. Anyway, okay, so now we're going to get into the grocery stores. And like I said in the beginning, when the Youngs sold it was with the stipulation that there would not be any stores for 50 years. Well, 5 years passed the stipulation date of 1889. In 1944-45, local grocer Theodore Ted Kirkendall and Endicott meat cutter Ray Cochran bought the property and converted the hall into a supermarket called Ted and Ray's IGA.
Yeah.
Anybody remember that?
Yeah.
It's before my time, but, you know. Okay. The next year, before Ted and Ray installed store fixtures in their IGA, they held a final dance and party that was attended by 450 people.
Wow.
So, Candor was swinging.
I'm going straight to the Baptist church service afterwards.
I think this was afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to start with, because I don't have any more information about Ted, and besides, they only owned it for about 3 or 4 years, and DePoy's came and bought it. So in 1948, the store was sold to Earl and Glenn DePoy. And Sandy's here, Sandy DePoy's keeping your eyes on me. This is information that I gleaned from them. So, you know, there's a lot of changes that were starting to take place grocery store-wise. So I thought this was interesting note. The original IGA store had many door locations, starting with one center door. Down through the years, the entering door was in many places and directions. A few years after purchasing the site, Earl DePoy changed it to 2 doors in the center. And you can see over here, I've got, this is what it looked like in the very beginning. Here's the IGA, and here's the George. So I didn't find a separate picture other than, you know, the whole building thing there with the doors in the center. A few years after purchasing the site, he changed it to 2 doors in the center. Okay, one going to the right and one going to the left. The storefront also had a hand crank roll-down awning, and I think you can see that in one of the older pictures on the top. When you went into the left-hand door, you were in the hardware section of the store. You could buy anything from baby clothes to pots and pans and dishes. Along the left-hand wall to the north were rows and rows of drawers with a sample of various sized nuts and bolts displayed on the outside. Then you moved to the shoe department on the back left-hand wall toward the school. It was situated in a half-moon-shaped room with fitting chairs to sit in and a foot-measuring slider and shoe horns. To the right, in the back of the shoe department, was the meat department with the old wooden chopping block in the center and the very thick wooden door that led into the cooler. In those days, you asked for whatever kind of meat you wanted. Sometimes the cuts were in a glass case. At that time, Art Howell was the meat man. Hamburger was 49 cents a pound. Now it's like 49 a pound. Which was made at the store with a big stainless steel meat grinder. Oh boy. The cottage cheese was 25 cents a pound and came in 50-pound tins, and you asked the butcher for whatever amount you wanted. He also had to put a cut of beef into a tenderizer to make the cube steaks. Chicken came whole, which also had to be cut up or bought whole. Is my time? Okay, in those days, a tractor trailer would back down between the buildings to the loading dock. I don't know what the beeping is. Oh, okay. It was a very tight squeeze, and back of the shoe and meat department was where all the deliveries were made to the stock room. And in that room, at that time, you could look up on the wall and see names of basketball players, as the room was used for basketball games before the school had a gym and before the building was a grocery store. I don't know if you can still see those or not. I have no idea. On the right side, hand side of the store was the groceries. Up in the front of the store to the right was where all the produce was kept. In those days, the potatoes came in 100-pound bags, and they were hand-bagged into 10-pound bags. Eggs came in gross crates, and they were put into cartons of 12. Okay, checking your merchandise out at that time was slow. It was done on the large hand-push number keys cash register. Everybody remember those old cash registers? Monsters. During the grocery store days, the upstairs on the right side of the building was a theater room with a stage, which is still there, where vaudeville-type productions were staged. Again, the Masons continued to meet here, The entrance to upstairs was on the side of the building where the driveway is. On top of the building was a village fire siren. And all the controls were in the stairway going upstairs. I didn't know that. I didn't know anybody else did. Later, they moved it across the street behind the Fountain Inn on double poles. I don't know where it is today, but I'm sure it's not there. So,
It is, if you live in a village, you know it.
okay. Thank you, good to know.
That thing goes off, you can hear it.
No one sleeps through it.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a little break here because in the 1960s, Bill and Barbara Black hardware store. The original store was located where Frontier Phone Company now has their building.
Yeah.
Okay, and of course, there was a fire, that's why it's not there anymore. So William and Barbara Black bought that site in 1958. At some point in the 60s, and we're not sure when, they combined with the grocery store across the street at the IGA, leased it for a period of time, and then purchased the building. And in 1971, they sold it to John and Betty George. So they owned it for a short period of time. So now we get into Little George Foods. And the information from this came from John and Betty George. I talked to them quite a bit about it. So in 1971, John and Betty LaGeorge bought the building from Bill and Barbara Black and opened their store as an IGA in December of 71. In May, June 72, there was much flooding and devastation due to the hurricane. Anybody remember the hurricane in 72? Yeah, I do. The basement filled very fast and all of the compressors were underwater, but after the cleanup, they still worked. So the Georges made a few changes, but kept the old wooden hardwood floors, which you still can see today. They're in there. They moved the entrances from the center of the building to the north corner on the left where it is today. So they're the ones that moved it. So John mentions that getting those 53-foot tractor trailers into the alleyway was always challenging. And interesting things sometimes happen. Such as banging into Bill Muir's building next door, the Candor Courier building. Winters were hard on almost flat roofs, and he had to shovel the snow off into the alleyway and hire Roger Townsend or Rick Kirk to haul it away before the truck deliveries. And he mentions, the people of Candor were awesome. Everyone through the years encouraged us, helped us, and prayed for us. God provided a wonderful home for us in Candor. So in 1981, the store changed from IGA to the George Foods when they changed to the Surefine brand. So then we will move on to the next market, which is the Candor market. And again, information is short but was provided by Teresa. So August 2007, Lloyd and Teresa Torres bought the store and renamed it the Candor Market and ran it until the economy no longer supported the business, and they closed it in 2019. However, their grand opening highlighted a special promotion where participants entered to win a $200 gift certificate. I don't know if anybody remembers that. The second place winner received a red Speedway Express wagon.
I remember that.
I don't know who the winner was. Keeping that a secret. They instituted a bottle redemption program, opened Main Street Spirits in the old Candor Courier office next door, and rented the storefront and apartments at 80 Main Street, which is the case on Pardon Gaines. Now, before I turn this over to Melvin, I do want to let you know what's taking place now, what's going on. Okay, so the update, February 2021, Chad and Athena Rose purchased Candor's historic sites, all three sites, at 80, 82, 84 Main Street. Okay, although Chad and Athena own the properties, they are renting out space for businesses to operate in these three locations, while the upper floors will be apartments. The previous Main Street Spirits business, now the Main Street Liquors business, is owned and run by Lisa Rose. She owns the business, but not the building. Kazan Card and Game Business owner, John Teffarella, remains the same. Again, they own the business, but not the building. So Candor Market location, 82 Main Street, will become two separate businesses sharing the first floor. Two Brothers Pizza and Subs, business owners Bart Smith and Terry Rose, and a fresh meat, produce market and deli business owner Lisa Rose will be on either side as you go in. I'm not sure entrance-wise how that's gonna work out. We'll find out soon enough.
Carol, just today they put in they're changing the door to the middle of the building. They've got the old
I knew they were going to do
door
that.
blocked off. So
Good.
it's going back to where it was.
Yeah, I gotta drive by. I gotta do a drive-by. Okay, and again, just to be clear that, they don't own the buildings, they own the businesses. She had nothing to own the buildings. So construction has begun and is ongoing, and hopefully the two businesses in the old Candor Market will be opening soon, prior to the entire renovation project. Now, apartments and the exterior are still being worked on because there'll be apartments on top of the whole complex. And I'm understanding from Chad that that'll be closer to 2023. But the businesses on the main floor should be sometime this year, hopefully before long, once they get the inside. Because they're working on the inside so the businesses can get going. Okay. That's basically what I have. Does anybody have any comments or they want to share?
How many apartments are there?
That I don't know.
Okay.
Do you happen to know?
There's gonna be 8 total.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
They're putting in 4 new ones up top, and then they got the 2 over top of the liquor store, and then the other 2 that are already over top of the game room.
Good.
Carol, I know the apartment above the game room, they had to fix because that windstorm that hit. I know the
I'm
individual.
sorry.
One of the apartments that was above the store, above Kazan, they ended up having to fix because that heavy windstorm,
Right.
over a year ago, the person that was in there took out part of his roof, so I know they had some work to do on that, right?
Well, what's happened is Chad got a grant, so everything is gonna be brand new. It's all being remodeled, everything's being gutted out, and then everything's gonna be brand new inside. The old slats that are on the floor will be staying. That's one thing that he wanted to stay, but everything else is gonna be different. It's not anything like we are used to seeing.
Yes.
A little tidbit. When my brother and I were growing up, on Friday night they had the store open, and they had a babysitter for us, but that babysitter's in this room.
No secrets.
Anything else anybody wants to add?
Carol, the oak floor that you mentioned is gone. I peeked in the window and it was all ripped up down.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No?
No?
The oak floor
No,
is
it's
still
not
there?
out yet. What's happened is the heat was off and it's starting to buckle. And so they got the heat back on. They're hoping it's gonna lay down, but if not, they're gonna replace all the buckled parts and it's all gonna
That's
be
good to know.
all sanded down and it's gonna be polyurethane and it's gonna be really nice.
Good.
Wow.
That's the plan.
I'm glad you're here. Any other questions or anything?
What was Sandy's job at DePoy's store?
I don't know. Sandy, what was your job at the store?
I packed up potatoes, packed up the eggs,
Okay.
sometimes
Potato packer.
the eggs, sometimes cash registers, just not much. Around.
Did you get paid, Sandy?
No.
No. No allowance,
No.
huh? I never got an allowance.
Cute.
Okay. Well, I never worked at any of these stores, even though I might have frequented them, I don't remember the toy store, but anyway, but Melvin did. And so Melvin's gonna come out, and he's going to, talk about his experiences. And so if any of you have any questions about working there,
It's kind of humorous, I'm looking around thinking, you guys probably know quite a bit about that store too. But I appreciate this chance to reflect on the business in the building because I guess to me, I would step back and look at the whole, the broader ecosystem because as most of you know, I lived next to the store, which was an absolute godsend because my mom didn't have a car. So my mom started working at the store and John said to her, "How old is your boy?" And she said, 13. He said, "When he turns 14, have him go put an application in." And so I did, and so he hired me. And it was wonderful because I could, and this is another thing, I was able to do sports. I remember doing cross country and track, and then hustling over to start work at 4 o'clock. And so I cut out of practice early, so I still got cut out of practice, but I was able to get to work, and it was just, it was a real blessing. And I'm going to tell some stories on people, but I hope it doesn't come across in a mean way. We'll save the worst stories. Yeah, so I guess what I want to say, I drive by and sometimes I feel like it's a big black eye there because that store's empty and the whole neighborhood that I lived in is blacktop. And I remember living in an apartment out front, there was 2 apartments out front, and there was those families in both apartments, and then there was a little house out back, and Jason Paxson lived out there. We'd all play wiffle ball in the middle area, and if we didn't have enough people, we'd put ghosties on the bases, but usually we'd try to flag people down going by, "Hey, you want to play our game?" And when I worked at the store, Jason Johnson, some of the other kids in my sister's class would come over and say, "When's your break?" Because on my break I'd hop over the fence and we'd play basketball for an hour. And I'd hop back, go back to work. And we talked about those buildings being all connected and some of them going as a unit, but the Schwartzes had bought that end building and turned it into a redemption center. Well, when I was a teenager and when I was in a junior high, of course Bambi had a consignment shop there, and we could hang out there. She was always very friendly. But then Ron Donahue put an arcade in there. And I remember going out, and I was probably 7th, 8th grade, and he's over there playing guitars, and I'd walk over, and then when I started working at the store, I had my own money, and at 10 o'clock at night, I could go to the machine and buy myself a Mountain Dew, and I felt like it was about the most wonderful thing in the world. And so when I drive by, I think, man, it's desolate. This whole area is desolate. And I'm really excited that the Roses and these other people are putting some businesses back in there. And that's one of the things, John really saw himself, he was a community person, and he saw himself as kind of a training ground for these young pups so we would know what it was like to have a job. So that was the context of some of the things that happened there. So I remember our first pay raise, and I looked it up to make sure the numbers were right. So I got hired in 1989, and my first pay raise was in 1990. John called the stock clerks up in his office, Bobby Smith, Ralph Guggenheim, I think Steve Williamson was there at the time. And he says to us, "Now, by now most of you have heard they're going to be getting a pay raise. It wasn't my idea. It was New York State's idea. So I expect you to work that much harder for the extra money I'm being forced to pay you." And the raise was from $3.35 an hour to $3.80 an hour. And I was thinking about some of the changes that happened. When I got hired, there was no mandatory recycling. And out back there was a big garbage pit. And the neighborhood cats, and I don't know where the hell, but I mean, by the time Lee Porter came by to pick things up, in the evening, if you knocked the side of that thing, cats were going everywhere. And and so then we were required to break down because we would just, we finish the boxes and everything would go out there. But then we had to sort out the cardboard and we had to sort out the glass and so forth. And all of a sudden there was a lot of space there, and there was a lot fewer animals, although there were from time to time other unusual animals. One time Lee left the door open and a skunk came in. And now the skunk had just gone to sleep in the corner, and there are maxims to deal with the situation. Bill Hollenbeck was our meat cutter at the time, and he didn't believe in those maxims. He wanted to get that skunk out of there now, so he jumped into the pit with a broom. And he said, no, I got it. You know, one smack with a broom, and everyone knows what happens. The whole back of the store smells like a skunk. So there were some benefits to the recycling. Aside from there was some actual benefits there for how we did things. Of course, when I started, we sold an awful lot of glass soda, and that changed, in the 90s. It became a very rare thing. Blizzard of '93 sticks with me. It was the first time I remember seeing all the carts out. We had a couple of old rusty carts in the back. One of them had a chunk out of the wheel we called Thumper. Even Thumper was going around this, the whole store was full. And I remember there was 2 inches of snow on the ground at one point, and all the carts were still out. And I think about it now, like, if we waited that long to get our groceries, you have to go a long way. Right? You couldn't just go a mile across town at the beginning of a blizzard. So one of the fringe benefits of working for John was that you were allowed to have a free meal on your break.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was typically, a banquet meal or something like that. One time, Steve Williamson had gone to the frozen food, and John was coming down the aisle. He was doing the order, and Steve reached down to the bottom and pulled out a $25 ice cream cake and headed toward the back. And John says, "What are you doing with that?" He says, "I'm going to eat it on my break." He says, "No, you're not." So there were limits, but my mother was always very thankful that I had jobs that offered free food, whether it was that or McDonald's or whatever. Some of the things that Carol mentioned were interesting about the store in the 1960s, because most of those things were still that way. We had our own stainless steel grinder in the back. We had a cuber and whatnot. Trucks backing down the alley were, as John said, that was still a challenge. And the Surefine industry has a regional hub in Olean, and that regional hub distributes all over from West Virginia to Maine, at least last I knew, because I worked for a year in Belfast, which was where there was also a Surefine. And the truck drivers that I unloaded at Belfast were very well acquainted with the store in Candor. Let's see. Y2K stuck in my mind. We've had crisis after crisis ever since then. But remember Y2K? That was going to be like the end of the world as we knew it. And because I know Bill Davis, that he wouldn't mind me telling stories on him. I'm going to tell some stories. Did anybody else here know Bill Davis?
No.
You might recognize him when I tell this story. Well, so he was a character, and one time he was finishing up in the line, and one of his classmates came into the store. My dad was about Bill Davis's age. That gives you some frankly. His classmate was taken aback, and he said, "Bill, what happened?" And Bill was walking with the cane. He said, "Well, this here is the consequences of living an intemperate lifestyle." He started laughing. But John had, as we had often, the trainload sales. We had these specials because of Y2K. And we were selling caseloads of vegetables. And so Bill wanted to make sure he was prepared for Y2K. By the way, service was a hallmark of John's. He made sure that we did carryouts, and I did carryouts down the street quite a ways sometimes. Quite a ways down Main Street. And we were not supposed to accept tips. And if he saw us accepting tips, we were in trouble. Although Roger and Georgia Westgate, they're not here, but they were particularly, they would seduce us. Say, "We know you're not supposed to get a tip, but please take it." Because John wanted to be known, he wanted to be able to distinguish himself from Walmart and Price Chopper, because he wanted to have service. Okay, so that was his thing. So I didn't write that in my notes, but we had one guy who worked with, every time he did a carryout, he had a brown bag out in his car. He would make a little stop at his car. And so that began to explain to us why his breath always smelled like garlic, because he would chew cloves of garlic to mask. How is that worth it? It didn't last a real long time, but So Bill, anyway, back to Bill. So I rode over to Bill. Bill lived on the corner of Ann Street and Spencer Road. And because he was, somewhat handicapped, he needed help, especially because he was putting all his stuff on the second floor. There was a window that looks out over Main Street there, and I was building it up like a fort. He wanted a wall. He wanted a wall around like this of all the vegetable boxes. And he said, I'm gonna get 100 cases of beer and 100 gallons of kerosene. I'm gonna be all ready for Y2K. So I'm carrying his stuff up and down. He says, yeah, because they're gonna come to me and they're gonna say, Bill, can I have a gallon of water? And I'm gonna say to them, a gallon of water for a night with your wife. I said, the Candor Creek is not gonna stop flowing because the computer shut down, bro. It was entertaining anyway. He had an imagination. But I didn't really have a lot to do with this one, but there was a time, there's a reason why stores and these kind of buildings have to have push bars to get out. And we would go around and shut off the lights. Sometimes there'd be a few minutes before closing, and there'd be customers still making the rounds, making their last choices. And one of them was Neve Doty one time. And everybody was in a hurry, including John, to get out that day, and I can't remember what happened. But I just heard about the aftermath because Eileen Ahart was walking down Main Street, and she heard a noise, and Neve Doty was at the front door. I said, help! Help! Because the door was locked and she couldn't get out the door. So John had some principles, and I understand that when he bought the place, they were selling alcohol, and he joined Allen Memorial. Allen Memorial's covenant strictly says that we will abstain from the sale and use of alcohol as a beverage. And so he was confronted with that, and he stopped selling alcohol. He also wouldn't allow toy guns to be sold in the store. And from time to time, we'd have merchants. We had various merchants that would come in selling things, and they would have a bunch of Jaru toys or whatever, and they'd be getting checked in, and they'd have a bunch of pistols. No, those aren't coming in here because he didn't want to encourage kids to play with guns. So, and of course, the beer was helpful in that it created a niche for other businesses around town, right? And deer season, you could always tell when the out-of-towners were there because they'd come in and say, where is your beer? Say no. Of course, they're ready to go deer hunting. They need some beer. I don't know. I remember Eric Carl campaigning for town supervisor from the deli, from the meat room. Some of you might remember him.
Yeah.
When I went to college, I had a whole week of people coming in and just and blessing me stuff. I remember Betty O'Consey coming in with a plate of cookies, giving me a hug and saying goodbye, and I think Julie Cornell made me a cake, and Betty LaGeorge made me a cake, and it was just like day after day of people coming in and just really acts of kindness to me. And then my first year at college, my birthday's in November, and my mother, and I have this card and I wanted to find it, I'll find it sometime. But my mother brought a card into the store. My mother's right over here. My mother started working there, of course, before I did, but I worked there later. I came back. I just kept coming back like a bat. One summer I came back and John said, you don't want to work here anymore. And I said, well, why am I asking? But anyway. My mother had gotten people at church but people in the store to sign, and so I pulled this card out, and there was like 150 people from Canada. So
wow.
probably the nicest birthday present I ever got. And, kind of made me a little homesick, but it was very nice. But, and a lot of my family worked there. My mother worked there, my sister Elizabeth worked there, my father worked there, my cousin Donnie worked there, my Veronica worked there. Like, I had a lot of family members that worked there over the years. I don't know where we would have been without that. But I don't know, I just think about, it really strikes me as one of the hubs of the community. And of course, you could always find out the latest scoop on something by popping in and asking Nancy Hayner, because if she didn't know, probably nobody did. If some of my friends came back to town, from college or whatever, they'd say, well, where's Melvin? She would put them onto wherever I was at the time. And it was an information center. I don't know, these are just some of my memories, and
The pharmacy was like that too, the one next door with Pete and was it like the gossip pick-up center? And then afterwards, it was a great place to get candy.
Oh, boy.
I remember that. That's like late 70s, early 80s-ish.
We cashiers always were getting calls of, why did the fire siren go off? What's the accident at the corner of such and such a thing? What's the phone number for the post office?
you couldn't trust all the stories that came around. I mean, I heard some about myself. I said, well, that's not quite true, but yeah, true story. Yeah, I just think about there were stores, right? And when Al Gagnon ran that variety shop across the store, that store was kind of dependent because the Stromans, I think, had a relationship with somebody else. So rather than hauling it back to their regional, the day-old stuff, he would pay for it, and then you go in there and buy a loaf of bread for 25 cents. Or, that was tasty cake stuff. Yep, that too. But in fact, I remember my friends. I brought my college friends to visit Candor for the first time. And they thought that was the best thing of the visit. These little dirt cheap things, and of course the Candor Fine Store, and that's about. I guess that's about all I planned on sharing. I mean, I could talk all day about that time, but. Yeah, and then, well,
Well, you're talking about the blizzard too. I remember I was one of the last ones there since we were just next door. John sent everybody else home. And while we were kind of waiting to see if anybody else was coming in, we were cleaning and straightening shelves and stuff like that. This guy came down on his snowmobile from up in the hills. They were making cookies and they didn't have chocolate chips. Had to have chocolate chips and cookies. He wanted to ride the snowmobile, yeah.
So you talked about signatures on the wall, and I have a picture somewhere, and I don't know if it's still there because I haven't been in the building in a while, but years ago, sometime 89 maybe, 80, somewhere in there, George Spicer had signed the wall where the truck unloaded, and then everybody from there just kind of signed all kinds of names and messages, and a lot of people remember that. When they came back in the store after leaving, they would look and see if their name was still on.
Does anybody have anything they want to share in regards to the complete building structures?
I remember when the girls were little, when I had the little tiny ones, and that I would shop here because I could get carry out. So usually it was Melvin. And I remember Hope and Scoy commenting that once Johnny's closed, she was able to shop at the other grocery stores. Because Johnny's was family. We didn't start
That's right.
anywhere. Johnny's.
Carol, you asked me if I got paid, and I said no. Well, one of the stories that came out of this was that Dad and Art Dillon, the owner of the fountain across the road, got in a conversation with the labor board of why aren't you paying your children? And Dad says, these are my kids, I'll do as I want.
That's the interesting thing. When I got hired at 14, my first task was to clean the meat room and sweep the floors.
Yeah.
So that meant disassembling the bandsaw and the slicer. And kids under 18 are not allowed to touch that anymore.
That's,
Yeah, right.
And it's so this is one of those things that makes it hard for kids to get jobs. I mean, I have one who's 16 in these places.
Yeah.
Like maybe when you're 17, when it's a little bit easier, it's.
Okay, if there's nothing else, I do want to mention a little bit about the History Center, if anybody's interested in what's going on there. We have gotten several grants, as Melvin mentioned earlier, and we are now in the process of, Ron Donahue is our contractor, and he did the outside porch thing for us.
Yeah.
Did a very good job.
Good.
We've gotten some funding, and so Ron is now in the process of putting in a decent cellar way going downstairs,
Oh.
blocking it off, and putting a door up above, so you don't have to lift it.
Yeah, right, right.
And fixing the
Yeah.
stairs. That's one of the things he's doing. Insulation is being done now. What else is he up to, Gary?
Oh, he's moving the bathrooms.
And moving handicap, we're gonna have the 2 handicap bathrooms, inside.
Yeah.
It's gonna take up part of where the kitchen was.
Right, as you come into the building, that part of the kitchen right there, is going to be 2 handicap bathrooms.
And that's not posh, you have to have 2 if you're building one.
Right,
so.
yeah, we've been dealing with a lot of, Gary's been dealing with a lot of, he does that kind of stuff. Our son Gary is our architect that draws up the plans and stuff for us, and he volunteers that, so that doesn't cost us anything. But Gary is our kind of
Go between.
go-between. He keeps Ron Donahue on his toes. I get the money in, he deals with the work. But we still have, it's been hard getting grants. And we just got another one that was in the paper for the insulation, so we can get started on that. We did get the building permit.
Permit, yeah.
Yeah, to do the work, and so, just got that today. So Ron can get going on that kind of stuff. There's still a lot more to do. There's the outside, the new doors and windows that we need, and again, we need money for that. And until we get the full amount, I've applied for more grants, but they are not gonna cover that. So, and when we get a grant, we have to use it for specifically what we've asked it for.
Yeah, right.
We can't use it for something else. So if something else happens, like when we had to do the chimney last year, that money can't be used for something like that. So we still need money. Donations from people have been great. We could use more. But anyway,
Our
and
can,
your membership helps.
mention the
much.
can thing down at Home Central,
Oh,
the can.
yeah, the can and bottle drop off at Home Central has been
That's been a-
wonderful. Thank you, everybody that contributes their cans and bottles. We started that 2-3 years ago, I can't remember, yeah. So that's been really helpful. And it's been helpful also for our maintenance. And that's one of the things that we have to really contend with too, is.
We didn't think we were gonna
insurance.
get much off those cans, but it's amazing how much money we're getting.
It's been great.
Totally amazing.
Great.
Especially at 6 cents. And the other thing I think many of you are aware of, but maybe not everyone, is on Monday mornings, the History Center is open. There's always volunteers there. People come in, ask questions,
coming
or
in,
do
yeah.
research. And so if you want to come in and look up something, look up a family member,
Or just check it out. See
Yep.
what see what we have.
Yeah.
or chat,
If you bring them.
Sounds like cooking to me.
Anyway, if you wanna come up and check out the pictures, my history books are here if anybody is interested. They are also at the History Center. If people, there's a lot of information there about the town halls and the buildings, of course. The books were, there's a little bit of information in each one. The first one, of course, is, some of you already have them, I know. The Centennial, Village Centennial, and so it's basically on the village up until, you know, that period of time. And then the other one was 2011, which was for the bicentennial of the town. And so it's got town information that the village does. But anyway, so they're available here tonight. Any last minute?
Kara, this would be a good time to remind people of your volume 2 of I Remember When.
Yes, I started
A
that.
lot of people here
Several-
got stories.
Yes, we want your stories. If, I've got, actually, there's one volume here, of I Remember When, I don't know. This is the first one that I did.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think this is Sandy's DePloy thing is in here, I believe, maybe not. But anyway, there's a lot of nice stories in here. And I actually did this, published this one for the Historical Society. So, you know, when you buy this, it's not paying for this, it goes directly to the Historical Society. But I'm working on the second one, and I know you all have such wonderful stories to tell. You know, get them down, handwrite them if you want to. You know, if you don't have a computer, you don't have a typewriter, I still have a typewriter upstairs. Anyway, you know, if you need somebody to talk to, you know, come in, you know, or give me a call, we'll sit down. But I know you've got some wonderful stories of living here in Candor.
Yeah, one of the things people forget is the present is tomorrow's history. So things you think, well, that wasn't that long ago. That'll be long ago, long enough, you know, soon enough. So put it down now.
And Nancy Riggs is working on the military.
Yes, Nancy is working on all the military
Yeah.
and the different wars and everything, and so she's got a big display, and there's displays, we changed the displays, so they're not all the same all the time. So no, she's got some new ones up there she's been working on, so yeah, so that's going on. A lot of things keep going on, we got a lot of stuff there, a lot of genealogy, and a lot of history on different things, so. And we'd like your history.
Actually, I have a question. You just said about the military. My dad, of course, wasn't born here. He moved here when he was 50, actually. And he was in the military. Would you guys still want information like that?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And pictures? Oh, okay, well.
Yes, pictures too, pictures too. I don't care, well, I'm sure Nancy doesn't care. I mean, we'd love to, let me put it that way. Anybody that was in the military, whether you were in a war or not, we would like your stories. We would like to hear from you, and, you know.
And if it's something you're not sure of, ask them, and if they don't want it, they'll tell you, but mostly.
They might not tell you, but take it anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
It's always somewhere
Might come in
through
handy
the-
later.
It's always somewhere through that building, so, yeah.
But like I always say, do I have a story for you?
Yeah.
Every one of you has a story for us. So I really would encourage you. You know, it could be funny, it could be serious, it could be sad, but it's a story of you here. Please. Anyway, with that, if there's nothing else,
Thank you, Carol.
thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming.